Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Thursday, July 10th, 2025, episode 434, and we're going to talk about taco and everyday items. Like, what is an everyday item? So, taco stands for Trump always chickens out, in reference to his constant policy reversals. It started, I don't know. It was a few months ago at a financial journal. I don't know. A writer came up with it. Let's see. Uh, Financial Times, Robert Armstrong, May 2nd, 2025. He came up with that expression, Trump always chickens out, taco. And it's this thing where Trump makes a threat and then turns around, doesn't carry out the threat, or maybe holds out a carrot and then hits with a stick, whatever. But this constant, you don't know what's going to happen next. And maybe if you live as an individual, this might work out. Maybe as a real estate person, this is an effective method of having relationships with other people. But as president of the United States, yeah, this just cannot work. Uh it's ridiculous, really. And to think that we are run in this way is kind of sad. And so again, uh, uh and I'm bringing this up mostly because I heard that expression today, and I was already thinking about lying culture, right? A culture of lying. So I was talking, or online, someone made a comment of a criticism I made of Trump, and he said, "You voted for this." Well, not really. I did not vote for this. I voted for peace because he said he was going to end wars. I mean, that was a big thing, and a lot of people were excited about that, which shows you that no one wants war. Only a small minority of people in the United States really wants war. And I say they can have war and make sure that they are sitting on the front lines, those who are screaming the loudest for war. And then we'll see how long they continue to like war. But the majority of people in the United States are sick of war. We don't want war. War is stupid. And all of the lies that are told to justify war is just asinine. And they're just so weak. And so I was thinking in terms of lying culture. And then, of course, I heard this expression, taco. I think Peter Schiff had used it. And I thought about, how does a lying culture come about? I was already bothered by the fact that so many people never admit guilt or that they're wrong. One might say women in general have a hard time admitting that they're wrong, or we can see that political people, people who are really fanatical about certain political positions, they never admit that they're wrong. They never admit guilt. And you saw this a lot with vaccines, the whole corona response, Russia collusion, illegal immigration, you name it. There's so many things that were shoved down our throats that turned out to be wrong. You know, blood clots, myocarditis, side effects of all the jab, all of this stuff. We were told that we're conspiracy theorists, that we're just crazy people, and it turns out that they were all wrong. I have yet to hear an apology and an admission of being wrong from anyone that I know. I've seen it with certain celebrities. Clearly, they have a conscience, but I've yet to hear it from anyone. And I've had arguments with those people. And of course, they just go right on pontificating and preaching the next political position that they are trying to force me to comply with, right? So, while not admitting, they continue to do what they do, move on to the next issue, move on to their next pulpit where they're going to advocate for something else that I don't agree with. Now, normal people, regular people, people who have a brain, they feel bad about lying and about being wrong. And eventually, especially when you tell them that, you make it really difficult for them to avoid admission, they'll say, yeah, you're right, I was wrong. And then you get to move on. But people who never admit that they're wrong, there's something wrong with them, right? There's something wrong there. Why can't you admit that you're wrong? Is there something about that? Now, I'm familiar with that feeling, with that vibe, with that attitude, and and I always talk about it in the sense that people think that when they admit that they're wrong, they can never ever assert anything true later, which is of course wrong. But once you've covered up or tried to pretend you weren't wrong or you didn't lie before a couple of times, now you can't go back, right? Because there's too much that you have to unravel. There's too much that you have to admit is wrong, which means who's going to believe you? Who's going to listen to you moving ahead? And now, obviously, no one is ever always wrong, right? People like a chronic liar never always lies because you never listen to them, right? But you mix in the lies with things that are true, which makes it a little bit more difficult. People who like that person will make excuses and say, well, they don't lie all the time. So you have this phenomena, right? But there is something seriously wrong with people who cannot admit that they were wrong or they got something wrong or they said something that which was not true. And it reminds me of something I read once, 30 years ago, perhaps. Uh, the author was James Scott, and there were two books I read from him, Hidden Transcripts or Thinking Like a State. I believe those two are from him. And I remember, and I read them before I discovered the free market. So I can't remember if he was actually left or right leaning, or even if he was libertarian leaning. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure because it was a postmodernist within the postmodernist framework that I might not enjoy reading it as much today. But anyway, he talked about the phenomena where people lie. People lie when they are oppressed. It's a method of resistance, right? So you're pushing back against whoever is oppressing you, an authoritarian power in your life, in your society. You never tell the truth to that entity, right? And so people lie as a way to resist. So when society discriminates systematically against quote unquote your kind of people, you can never really speak your mind plainly. And I know in Korea there are certain subgroups in Korea. Like if you're not familiar with Korean culture, you never see it. But Korean, I don't know how bad it is now, but 30 years, yeah, almost 40 years. Well, let me see. Yeah, 91. So we're going on 30 years. Yeah, we're going on 30 years. So 25 years or so in Korea, it was still pretty significant that certain subgroups were identified as being chronic liars. And in the United States, if you are old enough, you know that certain immigrant groups, when they first came to the United States, they were identified as being chronic liars, like Italians, for example. Oh, you're Italian. Oh, okay. So don't trust Italians. And my dad was told that by a lot of people when he first came to the United States, be careful of Italians because they lie a lot. And then moving forward, it was Puerto Ricans, whatever. So there are certain subgroups in various countries in certain situations where they are known to be or stereotypically known to be liars. And that's because there's not equal treatment, because there is marginalization, there is discrimination against that group. People generally will not speak plainly. But I think also it changes over time uh, that this lying phenomena becomes normalized for whatever reason. but it becomes normalized. And so in Korea, although it was widely believed that certain subgroups would lie all the time, I came to see that most people lied like they were breathing. And when I would pin people down, I said, why did you lie? I mean, you lied so casually. And now that I know that you lied, it's not a big deal. And for me to make it a big deal is impolite, which was really weird to me. And you begin to see this normalization through justification, right? That if I told you the truth, you'd feel bad. So I didn't want you to feel bad, so I lied. And I got that excuse so much. And and on a personal, individual level, that might fly. I guess I never liked it. And people stopped doing that to me because they knew that I despised it so much. But uh, if lying by an authorita authoritarian regime becomes so prevalent and so all the time, right? They lie all the time, then perhaps society itself begins to imitate that and lying becomes normalized. But in any case, there is an oppressive quality that is in place in society, which is why then people, to resist it, they feel like they have to lie. And so I wonder if this is the United States now, that the reason why Trump lies so much, the reason why so many politicians lie so much, the reason why so many people in society lie as much as they do, right? I mean, even the pronoun phenomena, or even most professors in the university when they construct narratives where there's discrimination as the conclusion. I think it's a kind of lie where you are going to ignore information and only push a subjective side of it, and you're doing it intentionally, which makes it a form of lying in the broad scheme of things. And so this is, I think, symptomatic of uh, oppression. Is that the United States now, that we are simply an oppressive society? Either we are directly oppressed or we imagine that we are oppressed through victimhood and things like that. But I also feel like if a country is very powerful and secure in how it does what it does, few people lie in that society, especially in the government. It's everyone else who lies. And I grew up believing that much of the time our government does not lie to us. At least that's what I believed. But nowadays, it's hard to find uh, the government as a whole telling the truth most of the time. It's very hard to see that. And so I wonder if it's an indication that the US is in major decline, right? I've mentioned this before, but is it, because we're so desperate, no one is lending us money anymore. The BRICS is getting more powerful. China is establishing all of these other trade routes. Even I heard several people say that, with all of this Trump's over the top, you better make a deal with us. Well, very few countries have stepped up and tried to make a deal with the United States. It's only a couple of countries, and everyone else has said, yeah, whatever, and have just moved on. And is it because of this extreme position of inferiority that now you see even more lying, right? So in other words, lying is indicative of being in the weaker position. And so is this phenomena, because it's rising so much now in the United States, that is it an indication that the United States is extremely, extremely weak? Food for thought. And sort of as a segue, or a what happens when a country becomes so weak. Well, 6 years ago, a student had asked me a question about an everyday item. And so they were trying to contrast everyday items versus luxury items. Like, why do only certain people have luxury items? And so, and what I said in response was, I asked a question: what makes an everyday item instead of a luxury item? And the answer, of course, is price. Now, toilet paper might seem to be an everyday item until it's not, right? Venezuela would be an example, toilet paper crisis. Now it's a luxury item, right? A long time ago in the United States, you saved newspaper simply because they used it as toilet paper. And so toilet paper, actual toilet paper, is an extreme luxury. So food can be an everyday item or a luxury item, especially when there's widespread starvation. So unrestricted free market activity usually, and there are very few exceptions, if any, results in lower prices with higher quality. And this is because of competition and productivity. And that includes greater efficiency and less waste. So racism, arbitrary discrimination, and exploitation are rare, right? It's very, very difficult to have this kind of arbitrary coercive behavior in society because you always have the choice of doing something else. In other words, if someone says, oh, you can't come into this store because of your skin color, then go to another store, which probably has better service and better prices. And so anyone who practices arbitrary discrimination, which has nothing to do with what the business is actually trying to accomplish, they get punished. Exploitation, which is, of course, something is exploitative when there is no choice. But when you have plenty of choices because of the free market, you can't have exploitation, right? So the more freedom you have, the less arbitrary discrimination and exploitation there can be in that society. And when racism and exploitation are hard to find, prices are coming down while quality is going up. In fact, high prices may exist for a short period of time, but high prices become the incentive for people to make the same item for profit, right? So more and more people pile into the manufacture and production of certain products. And because so many people are trying to make a lot of money with that high-priced item, the prices come down. So, because supply increases, and it happens very, very quickly. If you just look at the way it used to be in the United States, a new electronic good hits the market, it's $10,000 for a new VCR, and then eventually they're giving them away for free. Then DVD comes around, and it's $10,000 per DVD player, and then all of a sudden the prices are coming down, and eventually they're giving them away, right? And they're obsolete now because of streaming. So you have this phenomena where high prices incentivizes people to come up with better alternatives, right? And the prices come down. So if you are upset about the high prices of healthcare, college fees, you just have to remove state interference, including subsidies, right? You can't subsidize, you can't give loans, you can't give awards, you can't give patents, you can't give, exclusive deals, right? And when you do that, people have more choices. All the snobs in academia and in religious organizations, they got to hit the road, right? Because it doesn't matter. No one cares. No one will pay attention to them, right? So an example. So in medicine, why is it so hard to become a doctor? Oh, it's so hard and so long. So let's come up with an alternative, the physician's assistant. And I'm sure that you've seen one by now. I remember when they first started to appear, and people started studying to be more. It was so much. And you could see that there was not that big of a difference between a physician's assistant and an actual doctor, except liability. Liability becomes a large factor in terms of pay scale. Instead of having more choices for everybody, you could push a narrow subjectivity through legislation, that is force, and that prevents more choices. It prevents cheaper options. Now, if you always prefer to spend more, well, that's your personal choice. No one cares. But if everyone is forced to pay more for something which the government or the state has decided is the only good choice, well, then most people are angry. And eventually, believe it or not, and I'll have time to talk about it here, but this is the path to war. You stop others from making their lives better in other countries, right? Other countries are doing something better. You don't like it because it puts all of your protected industries in your country on the brink of bankruptcy. And so you have to war. You have to make up a reason or an excuse to bomb all of their factories so they can't make items cheaper and better than you can. So, right. And all of this came from the question of what is the difference between luxury and everyday items? Why can't we make luxury items everyday items? Well, it does happen. It used to happen all of the time until government became as big as it is now. So stop the hate, right? The hate of that is promoted by socialism and communism, all the leftist agenda, uh, and that includes Republicans. Okay, a lot of leftist Republicans, because this is, so promote freedom instead, and then learn to tolerate the choices that other people make, and then watch all the prices come down. You might not like all of the choices other people are making. So what? The prices are coming down. The quality of everything goes up. I was asked in my arbitration hearing a couple weeks ago if I knew, I don't think I mentioned this before, but the opposition lawyer asked me if I was aware that people call me racist. And I said, well, yeah. And they didn't follow up, and I should have realized what she was doing. And what I should have said was, I study race. Of course, I'm a racist, right? Someone who studies biology is a biologist. So therefore, someone who studies race would be a racist. Or I should have said, who's not a racist today? But think about it. What is a racist? To discriminate according to my own personal needs, which is fine, right? That's what marriage is all about, right? So we should all embrace our so-called inner racist, allow other people to practice their own discrimination, right? And more luxury goods become everyday items. And all of us will get to laugh at the communists and the socialists. And that's it for today. Stay free, and I'll talk to you next time.